Well, hello again, everybody. Dr. Peck back at you. This week, week one of our course, is going to involve some reading from chapters 1 and chapter 3 in our textbook. And I want to kind of give you a little bit of a scaffold here for what's going on between those two chapters. Note, of course, that we're going to be skipping for the moment chapter 2. In fact, we're going to be coming back to that at the very tail end. Chapter 2 deals with research methods, and I would prefer that you all get a chance to get a feeling for what the conceptual and theoretical and substantive content of sociology is, at least in a broad sense, before we go about worrying about how to go about actually doing research in that field. So with that, let's begin with chapter 1. Not surprisingly, that chapter begins, as most courses in an introductory subject area would, with giving you a feeling about the field, its founding, and some of the important people who were involved with it. Let me talk about the first one first, and that is the important people who are associated with it. You will encounter in this chapter kind of a brief overview of several of the big names, if you will, the founding fathers of sociology that we always talk about. And there are probably four at this point in particular that I'd like you to take special note of. As you go through the course, try to keep these folks in mind, what their basic ideas were, and how those ideas influenced what you'll be learning about later. So the first of these folks is a fellow by the name of Auguste Comte, C-O-M-T-E. Comte was a French philosopher and is recognized as, if you will, the founding father of sociology, if only because he's the fellow who gave the field its name. And he was a very influential person in the intellectual circles of his day about the time that sociology was getting underway as a recognized discipline several hundred years ago now. A second person you're going to be wanting to take a look at is Emil Durkheim, D-U-R-K-H-E-I-M. Durkheim is going to be associated especially with something that's going to be called the structural, functional, or more simply, the functionalist paradigm in sociology. A third person will be Karl Marx, and I'm sure many of you have heard about Karl Marx in a number of capacities. Marx was not only a founding father in sociology, but also an important figure in history and in philosophy, and certainly in economics. In fact, from time to time you will see reportage of lists reported to be the 100 most influential people ever to have lived. And you will just almost always find Karl Marx's name on that list. Now, Marx was a founding father of what we call the conflict perspective in sociology. Closely behind Marx, you're going to encounter a fellow by the name of Max Weber, W-E-B-E-R, another German sociologist like Karl Marx. Now, if Max Weber had been born in Great Britain, we would probably call him Max Weber. But the German pronunciation of his name is Max Weber. Much of what he wrote about was done in response to what Marx had to say. And indeed, much of what Weber spoke of was constructed in what has been called a dialogue with the ghost of Marx. Now, you'll want to remember these folks, if only because they are founding fathers in sociology, and every field has people whose names are associated with that field. So much so that we often speak of entire lines of thought or ideas or sets of ideas by referring to those names alone. And this is one of the reasons that you're going to want to remember names in a field like sociology. You'll also encounter that in, for example, physics, where you'll encounter names like Newton and Einstein, who are remembered in part for those very same reasons. Now, the next thing you're going to be wanting to encounter in that first chapter is a discussion of the three major paradigms of sociology. These, again, are structural functionalism, or more simply functionalism, the conflict perspective, and then something called symbolic interactionism. The first two of those, functionalism and conflict, are what are called macro, or large-scale paradigms, or ways of looking at the subject matter that sociology deals with. The third one, symbolic interactionist theory or paradigm, is a way of looking at things that sociology concerns itself with, but from the perspective of the small scale order where you and I as individuals live and exist. So small groups and individuals will be very, very important in symbolic interactionism. You'll also begin to encounter some other ideas about what sociology's history has been in this chapter, and while very, very interesting, I think the things I've just mentioned are the ones that I would like to highlight for present purposes by way of guiding you. Try to take note of those things in particular, and you might also want to go ahead and link them together with the material that you've encountered in that short overview of sociology that I provided for you in that folder, which is under the tab Materials Supporting Student Success. The third chapter is going to deal with something that's very, very important for us, and that is the matter of culture. Culture can be considered as the total way of life of the people who exist within a society, and there are two major parts of it. The material culture, which is all of the stuff, if you will, or tangible things that define our way of life. So certainly in the United States, those would be things like our advanced technologies, our mechanical technologies, our planes, our cars, our televisions, our cell phones, all those kinds of things. Our unique styles of dress would be in there, the kind of housing, anything that has a material aspect to it or tangible aspect would be a part of what we call the material culture. But for our purposes, the more important part of culture is going to be the non-material culture. And in this respect, I'd like you to pay a special attention to the idea of social values, because these are the things that provide the fundamental underpinning that presumably tie together all the people within a society. And the second thing will be a number of different kinds of things that are collectively called norms, N-O-R-M-S, which can be thought of as the rules by which we live in our society. Interestingly, the material culture actually follows from the values and the norms that are found in the non-material culture. So you'll want to keep that in mind as you go along. And then finally in this chapter you'll also encounter some discussions of some subsets of the way of life that we have, and you'll begin to encounter the notion of different kinds of people or subsets of people in society. One important descriptor being thereof something called subcultures. So for the moment, that's probably a good overview of what you're encountering this week, and those are the things I wanted you to kind of be sensitive to and be thinking about as you get along. Again, I hope you have picked up something from the thumbnail. You're beginning to make your way through the materials that are in that Supporting Materials for Student Success tab. Next week, you are going to be asked to be declaring which of the various term paper options, and there are 4 of them, as you know from reading the syllabus, that you will be choosing. So right from the get-go, it'd probably be a great idea to begin thinking about the term paper assignment. Each one of those assignments is intended in one way or another to help you draw a connecting linkage between the material you're encountering formally in our learning through the textbook and something that you can experience or kind of examine, if you will, from the lens of a real world or a quasi-real world type of experience. So I'll have more on that in the thumbnail that deals with next week's material. Again, hope this has been helpful for you. Good luck with this semester, and good luck with this week's work getting going. Again, any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Bye-bye for now.